The rain fell over Waterloo like a curse. The ground was soaked, the sky heavy with storm clouds, and the air carried the thick scent of mud and fear. Across the Belgian countryside, thousands of men waited, some praying, some silent, some staring into the mist where their destiny waited. It was June 18th, 1815, a Sunday morning that would be remembered for centuries. The rolling fields around the small village of Waterloo had become a sprawling camp of anticipation. Horses snorted restlessly, cannon wheels sank into the earth, and every soldier knew that when the sun rose high enough to burn through the mist, history would turn its gaze upon them. And in the midst of them rode Napoleon Bonaparte, once the master of Europe, the man who had crowned himself emperor, who had brought kings to their knees, now staring at the dawn of what could be his final day. He was calm, almost too calm, his gray overcoat soaked, his eyes distant. He knew what lay ahead. He had gambled everything on one last throw of the dice. The veterans who watched him that morning saw not the firebrand of Austerlitz or Jena, but a figure burdened by destiny. He rode along the lines in silence, occasionally stopping to nod at familiar regiments. Men who had followed him through deserts and snow, who would follow him now into the storm of battle. 100 days earlier, the world had believed him finished. Banished to the small island of Elba, Napoleon had been left to fade quietly into history. But ambition never dies quietly. Elba had been meant as a cage for a lion, a tiny rock off the Italian coast, surrounded by the endless blue of the Mediterranean. The Allied powers thought him broken, content to live out his days in exile. They underestimated the restlessness of genius. On that island, Napoleon still rose before dawn. He reviewed local militias, studied newspapers, and watched ships pass on the horizon. He knew his enemies were divided, Britain occupied in diplomacy, Austria and Russia mistrusting each other, and Louis XVIII weak and unpopular. His old army longed for his return, the tricolor whispered about in taverns and painted in secret on walls. Napoleon listened, he waited, and then he acted. In February 1815, he escaped his island prison with a handful of loyal soldiers and sailed back to France. When royal troops came to arrest him, he stood before them and declared, "If there is one among you who would kill his emperor, here I am." The soldiers hesitated. Before them stood not a fugitive, but the legend of 1,000 victories. They lowered their muskets and cheered. France had chosen. "The eagle has flown," shouted the crowds in Paris. "The emperor is coming." In days, he was back in the capital, the tricolor flag flying again. Europe was stunned. Britain, Prussia, Austria, and Russia moved swiftly, uniting to destroy him once and for all. They called it the 100 Days. Napoleon called it destiny. He knew the clock was ticking. Armies were already marching. He reorganized the government, rearmed his forces, and within weeks, France once again marched under the eagle. But this was not the same Grande Armée. Many veterans were gone, cavalry weakened, officers divided. Still, the emperor believed in speed and surprise. His plan, strike north into Belgium, separating Wellington's Anglo-Allied army from Blücher's Prussians, defeat them in detail, one before the other, and force peace before Austria and Russia could intervene. By mid-June, his 72,000-man army crossed the River Sambre, advancing like a thunderstorm. To the north, Wellington commanded a mixed force, British, Dutch, and Germans, experienced but uneven. To the east, Blücher's Prussians were fierce and eager for revenge. Between them, the fate of Europe waited. Napoleon moved fast, defeating the Prussians at Ligny on June 16th, a hard-won victory but costly. He believed them broken, but they retreated north, not east, toward Wavre, still close enough to rejoin Wellington. 2 days later, June 18th, 1815, the fields near Waterloo became the stage of history. The rain had poured all night, turning the ground to a swamp. Artillery wheels sank deep into mud. Napoleon waited for the field to dry, delaying his attack until late morning, a decision that would change everything. Across the valley, Wellington's 68,000 soldiers waited behind ridges and farm walls. His position was a masterpiece of defense. Troops hidden behind a ridge, the villages of Hougomont and La Haye-Sainte forming natural strong points. Napoleon would have to attack uphill through open ground. That morning, Wellington rode quietly along his lines. "Stand firm, my lads," he said. "We'll give 'em a damn good licking today." The first cannon roared before noon. Napoleon's opening move targeted Hougoumont. What began as a diversion turned into a slaughter. British guardsmen held out against endless waves of French infantry. The Coldstream and Grenadier Guards fought from walls and burning buildings. The gates shut as French troops burst through, trapping them inside the courtyard. The battle raged for hours, brutal, close, merciless. Napoleon had wasted thousands of men on a diversion that refused to die. By early afternoon, he shifted to the center. 18,000 French infantry advanced in tight formation, a blue tide of bayonets. Cannonballs tore through ranks, yet they pressed forward. Then from behind the ridge, British lines rose. "Fire!" A wall of musket smoke erupted. French ranks shattered and fell back. Napoleon's expression hardened. His central assault had failed. Mid-afternoon, Marshal Ney, believing the British were retreating, launched one of history's largest cavalry charges. Thousands of horsemen thundered across the muddy plain, but Wellington's men formed infantry squares, walls of bayonets that no cavalry could break. Charge after charge, the French fell under volleys of musket fire. Ney led from the front, reckless and brave, until the cavalry lay scattered and broken. Napoleon's greatest weapon, momentum, was gone. As the day wore on, dark shapes appeared on the eastern horizon. The French thought them reinforcements. They were Prussians. Blucher's army had arrived. Napoleon was now fighting on two fronts, surrounded and exhausted. Yet he refused to yield. He sent Marshal Lobau to delay them near the village of Plancenoit. There, French and Prussians fought street by street, house by house. The Old Guard retook the village for a time, but Blucher sent more divisions, and the battle raged like a furnace. By early evening, cannon fire from Wellington's Ridge mingled with the musket volleys from Plancenoit. Still, Napoleon clung to hope. He turned to his last reserve, the Imperial Guard. They were his pride, veterans of a dozen victories, men who had never known defeat. He pointed toward Wellington's Ridge and ordered them forward. They marched in perfect formation, drums beating steady. "La Garde avance!" The cry spread through the ranks. Hope surged one last time. Napoleon watched silently. All his glory rested on this final charge. As they climbed the ridge, British troops waited hidden behind the crest. Volley after volley tore through the Guard. They staggered but pressed on. Then came the cry that broke France. "La Garde recule!" The Guard retreats. Panic spread like wildfire. The Grande Armée dissolved into chaos. Wellington gave the order. "Advance, gentlemen, and make an end of it." His line surged forward. At the same moment, the Prussians broke through at Plancenoit. The French army was surrounded. Flags fell, cannon fell silent, and Napoleon's empire died in the mud. As night fell, the field was a sea of broken bodies. Rain returned, washing the blood from the trampled earth. Napoleon rode through the wreckage in silence. He ordered retreat toward Charleroi, but there was no army left to command. Wellington walked among the wounded. "Nothing except a battle lost can be half so melancholy as a battle won," he said. Napoleon reached Paris to find the city whispering the truth. Waterloo. The Chamber of Deputies demanded his abdication. On June 22, 1815, he stepped down in favor of his son, Napoleon II. But the dream had ended. He fled toward Rochefort, hoping to escape to America. But the British Navy waited. On July 15th, he surrendered aboard HMS Bellerophon. "I come, like Themistocles, to throw myself upon the hospitality of the British people," he said. They sent him instead to St. Helena, a lonely island in the South Atlantic. He arrived in October 1815. Longwood House was damp, cold, and guarded day and night. There, the man who had commanded millions was confined to a few acres. He dictated memoirs, walked the garden paths, and reflected on destiny. Even in exile, his presence astonished visitors. Small in stature, yet commanding still. Years passed. His health declined. By 1821, pain racked his body. He wrote his will, asking to be buried on the banks of the Seine. On May 5, 1821, Napoleon Bonaparte died. His last words, "France, the army, Josephine." Decades later, his remains returned to Paris. Crowds filled the streets as his coffin was placed beneath the golden dome of Les Invalides. There he lies still, his name carved in gold. Love him or hate him, the world has never forgotten. Napoleon Bonaparte, the soldier who became a ruler, the ruler who became a the legend who became a warning. His rise changed the world. His fall changed it again. If you found this story of Napoleon Bonaparte's rise and fall fascinating, remember, history is never just about the past. It's the mirror through which we see our present. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more gripping tales from history's greatest moments. Share your thoughts below. Was Napoleon a visionary hero or an ambitious tyrant? Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the past that shaped our world.